jump straight into it. I think Omar's given us a link of what we were discussing last week. Today, I want to go a bit more into detail when we look at how we now implement playing philosophy. So I want to go through it step by step, a little more detail. Obviously, a national playing philosophy is very detailed. It needs possibly a 3 to 5 day workshop. But these sessions help us a bit get a bit of insight what it's all about. So today, what I would like to do is explain in detail, a bit detailed, how to implement step by step. And then later on, I would also like to give you guys a bit of insight how to design your own philosophy for your club. Because what we are discussing generally last week and this week is a national playing philosophy that should be implemented by a national FA. So how then do we take down that to club level? So a bit later, I would go into that. So when we're talking about the national playing philosophy, to be implemented, firstly, a national FA needs to have a coherent national technical policy. So it might sound like a big word, but the technical policy is the a policy that governs how you operate on a national level, how your national coaches are appointed, how players are selected, all in relation to your medium and long-term objectives. So that's where your philosophy fits in, but you've got to have a national technical policy that's coherent. When I say coherent,
Sudesh.
it means that it must be
Sudesh, sorry.
systematic.
Omar, one of us is unmuted and there's a lot of background noise.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think we go back to a national technical policy, and I think normally you find this with advanced countries, countries that compete internationally and win tournaments. So basically a national technical policy is a policy that covers is a framework for you to operate under. So it needs a lot of insight, a lot of expertise to draw up a national technical policy, and under that comes the philosophy. So when we look at how do we implement this philosophy, it's a three-stage approach. First one, once you've defined your philosophy, then Zippo discussed a few weeks back about player attributes. Obviously, that's crucial. Your player attributes. Then you're going to start to define how do you play football. How should you play football? Talking about this is how your national team should play football. That is all obviously dependent on the characteristics of your players. So looking at how do your national teams play and how do we compete international level. So when you break it down further, you've got to come up with details and content. And how do we play in attack? How do we play in defense? And how do we play in other moments of the game? What are the limitations of our players according to their attributes? And going forward from there, then you look at the intelligences. What are the playing intelligences of the players to play at that level? Do we have the players? Are they fully developed to play at that level? And how would they play according to the philosophy? The personality and the character of the players are very important because we're talking about national team and international football. So that when we have a workshop. But scientists have found there are 16 types of personality. So can you imagine how difficult for a coach to put a team together and you get virtually 16 different types of personality traits? Then you got to obviously look at your technical part, your tactical part, and your physical attributes. So that's what actually defines on national team how do you play the game. So from there, how do we now get it out to the coaches? So the coach education system and syllabus must now detail all this content. You break it down, you go right in the content, and how do you train other coaches? One of the key things we need to put in the coach education syllabus is the talent criteria. What kind of players are we looking for? What kind of players do we scout for? So there's a set of criteria that we have defined generally that suit the attributes of our players. Then you look at the various phases of development. We go into content, we design content from the very basic level. It's called pre-development level. Pre-development level is a new trend in modern football, whereby they're starting to get kids from a very young age, from basically from 3 years, 4 years to about 6 years, 7 years. So that's where we need to start. We need to start going as young as that. And you look at, I think it's Brazil, Holland have also started programs at creches. So basically, 3 to 4 years, you might think that it's too young, but you don't go into heavy coaching, a lot of technical work. It's just to activate the genes with ball skills, coordination, balance, and stuff like that. Then the next aspect we go into is youth development, which is more detailed, possibly from the ages of about 7 to 15. There's various phases of youth development that we'll discuss going forward. And then you get your elite youth. Your elite youth is about from 16 to 18. That is where players should be in the youth national teams, professional academies, and some of them should be breaking into professional football. Then we come to professional football and competitive football. For that kind of training, we also need specific content. Then lastly is your national teams. There's content around that. How do coaches coach national teams? So you can see the coach education and the content of the syllabus is very, very intense and very detailed. Then you put all that together, there's still, you got to design a pedagogy. How do you then teach coaches? Do we do it the old way as we've been doing, just basic theory and a little practicals? So we got to design a specific pedagogy, bearing in mind the culture, the conditions of your country, whichever country you are. Especially in South Africa, we got to look at the past education system. Not everyone speaks English. Not everyone has been academically privileged. So how do we then design a pedagogy that we teach coaches? Then the last and the important part is the specific training methodology. How do we now make this philosophy come alive? How do we make this coaching content that we have in the education system come alive? So we design specific training methodology for the various levels. Youth level, you can't do at youth level what you do at senior level because the kids are not mini adults. So it's got to be a specific designed training methodology that you use at youth level. As we go forward, there are 5 phases of youth development that we will discuss. And I think we have a lot of coaches here involved in youth football. It's very, very important and it's critical that coaches get a very, very good understanding of youth development, because even if you can later on go on to become a national coach or a senior professional coach, if you don't have a strong background in youth development, you will not be successful as a senior coach. It gives you that foundation, it gives you that background, it gives you that chance to experiment, to learn about physiology, to learn about phases of development, so that once you're at senior football, you're well equipped to deal with the challenges there. It's same like going to school. You don't just go to high school or university. You've got to start in primary school. Likewise in coaching. So I'm glad that a lot of you are showing interest to learn more, because youth development, to me, is the most critical phase, because if we get it wrong there, we will never develop quality players. And I think on the African continent, in South Africa and maybe some other developing countries, we don't give youth coaches the dues that they deserve, because they actually do a lot of work and most times for little reward and remuneration. So it's something I think we need to do, especially in South Africa and developing countries. We need to invert the pyramid. The pyramid, as we all know, it's triangle shape. We need to invert it, whereby priority is given to the grassroots and youth development. Because without a strong base, without a strong foundation, our national team will never achieve success or never be successful. So I think in developing countries, we should, I'm not saying that we don't need to give priority to national teams, but I think resources, attention should be also given to grassroots and youth development, because without that strong base, there'll be no future. There won't be professional football, there won't be national teams. So for developing countries, we call it, we need to invert the pyramid, whereby the base of the pyramid is youth development and grassroots. That should take priority. So all of this, as we said, you need specific training methodologies for various phases, for the youth phase, for the competition phase, that's a professional phase, and national team phase. Then all of this, how do we put it together? We spoke about 3 different components. All of this will be displayed if we have a coherent and structured competition system. So the competition system in the country, as when we're talking about South Africa, must be designed according to the performance objectives of the nation. It must be driven by the technical policy. So we don't have this anomaly where you have a promotion league like a NFD and you have age restriction, where you have a Motsepe league and you have age restriction. Those leagues are professional leagues and you're playing for promotion. It's not leagues for developing football. Those should be done at a lower level, or you should have national under 20 leagues, national under 19, national under 17, and so forth. You cannot be developing players at that level, at NFD level and Motsepe League level. Those are professional league, and players and teams, they want to ultimately achieve the aim of promotion to the Premier League. So when we talk about a structured, coherent competition system, that's what we're talking about. It shouldn't be the other way around, whereby sponsors dictate how a competition should be structured. The competition system should be structured around the technical policy and the developmental and performance objectives of a nation. So those are the things that when we implement it step by step, countries achieve success. So when we did our case studies, and we mentioned briefly last year, you look at countries that are more advanced, countries that win the World Cup or challenge for the World Cup, they can at least put together possibly an 8 plan and they can still be successful. Developing countries, we're looking at not less than 10 to 12 or even 14 years. But we've got to be patient and consistent and keep implementing, evaluating, monitoring as we go along. And eventually, if you do it the right way, you will achieve success. Where besides the famous countries that we looked at that did achieve success, you look at the case study of a country like Iceland. If some of you are acquainted with how they achieved success, they started way back about 10 or 12 years ago, and they're a very, very tiny country. They have not even 500,000 people in the country. They're under 500, if it's about 400,000 people. But they restructured the whole football setup. They have one of the smallest coach to player ratio. They have the highest percentage of UEFA A and B coaches qualified in Europe. The facilities, the government poured a lot of resources into facilities, because bearing in mind that country for about 9 months or 10 months of the year is under snow. So they built a lot of indoor multi-purpose facilities. And you had seen recent years, they achieved success in the Euros and they qualified for the World Cup. So it shows that even if you are a so-called smaller country, but if you have a plan in place, if you have visionary leaders, if you have the right technical expertise, the right knowledge, and you implement all of this effectively, you can achieve success. So we mentioned last week some of the countries, the case studies. Germany, we know very well. Everyone knows the German example. But you look at the last World Cup, another example that a country that went very, very close to winning the World Cup was Belgium. Belgium put together a program about 14 to 15 years ago. The first group of players that came out of that system was the players who performed so well in the 2018 World Cup. I'm talking about the group of the Hazard, Lukaku. They started in this program. When the program was started years ago, they were between 8 and 10 years old. So now they reached their peak and they almost won the World Cup. The one problem I feel, it's my opinion, and maybe some of you will agree, why they didn't really win the World Cup is I think they had the foreign coach, and they didn't have a unitary philosophy. They had exceptional individuals that were developed in a system, but there was no philosophy that joins them collectively. And they didn't have a local coach to lead that group. So that's my own opinion. You guys might debate that and disagree or agree, but I feel it's very important. You look at all the countries that have won a World Cup; they were all won with a local coach. There's no country that won the World Cup with a foreign coach, and there's no country that won a World Cup without a long-term plan, without a philosophy in place. It's impossible to achieve international success. We look at it at the youth international levels. You study a lot of FIFA reports, you will see some countries, especially African countries, Nigeria, Ghana, have won under 17, under 20 World Cups. You ask yourself, why then did they not go on to win the Senior World Cup? The very same thing. There was the lack of a philosophy in the nation. There was no unitary coaching system. And obviously, we know the other issues of age cheating and such, because when you track back the players who played in those World Cups, very few of them actually went to play and achieve success at the international level, whether at club level or national team level. A lot of them got lost along the way. So when you look at other developing countries who use successful systems, long-term planning. I mentioned last week Japan. Japan has an amazing long-term plan. I mentioned to you guys, it's not just a 10-year plan. They have two philosophies. One is a 50-year plan, that's on performance, the professional level, national teams, that's the one philosophy, the technical or the performance philosophy. Then they have a philosophy, a 100-year philosophy to improve the game in Japan, to bring more players into into the game, to bring more fans into the game, to improve their facilities, and to eventually become one of the leading nations in world football. So when you look at the thinking, we are looking at now, immediately, today and tomorrow. Other countries are looking at long before, long after they would be dead and gone. They're looking at leaving legacies. That's what visionary planning is all about. So I think we have so much potential, especially in South Africa, the African continent, and lots of parts of Asia, South America. The talent is there, the raw talent is there. But the glue that brings it all together is a philosophy. But having a philosophy is just theory. How then do we put it into practice? So when we look at the methodology that we talk about, the maximize talent development, it's actually a methodology that is the theory of practice. Because theory without practice is irrelevant, will never achieve anything. So the practical part of it is what brings the theory alive. So philosophy is basically your theory. The training methodology is the practice about it. And eventually from there, with the correct training, with the correct development from youth level, you would be producing quality players. And the end product of all of that is you will have a unique and specific style of play. Someone raised a question last week. We're speaking about the national playing philosophy. That's for the country. How then do we take that down to the lower levels? How then you, somebody who has a club, say in Maritzburg or Newcastle, you have a club, how do you design your own philosophy? You use the national philosophy as a template, and then you look at your players. What are the attributes? Zippo mentioned carefully the other week, attributes of players are, we're looking at the majority of the players. So a lot of those players, the attributes that Zippo discussed, you would find that within your team. From there, you would then know what kind of football you need to play based on the attributes of your players. Then you will design your game model, your playing style, and you will design your training exercises. And from there, you have your own philosophy. But when you have a club level, as I mentioned, there's two parts to a philosophy, or there's two philosophy. One is a technical philosophy, with performance-based. The other is a philosophy of how you run your club. It's actually the culture of your club, how you do things at your club. What's the way you talk to your players? How do your players behave? How do your players dress? How do you prepare for game? That is your philosophy of the club, your culture of your club. What are your long-term plans? What are your medium-term plans? Where do you want to see your club in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? Do you want to be playing in the promotion league? Do you want to be playing at Motsepe League? Do you want to be playing at NFD? So that is your philosophy, overall philosophy of a club. Do you want to develop players to sell? Do you want to develop players to to gain promotion. Those will all be built into your philosophy that you will design. As we go along, we will teach you the principles of the methodology so that you are able to design your own training exercises. We need to move away. We spoke about it, that we need to create coaches who are thinkers, innovators. So we need to move away from this habit of cutting and pasting. We all can go and Google and we get millions of exercises, but do understand why that coach does that exercise that you lifted out of Google or from someone's textbook. So what we will try to do is to equip you and arm you with the principles around the game, the principles of how to design a training methodology, the principles how to design training session, so that you know your players better, and then you will know how to design your own training session. So basically, it's not a very it's people think yes, the MTD methodology is very complex. It's not really complex. Once you understand the principles, you'll be able to go out there and design your own exercises. There are a lot of coaches on this platform who do that currently. I don't get any coaches asking me, Coach, can you send me an exercise on this, how to keep possession or how to do this? And I don't have any books myself. I've given out everything that I had, DVDs, videos years ago, because of this habit of people cutting and pasting. So now you, when you train your own team, you will first start thinking yourself, what are the qualities of my players? What are my objectives? What are my short-term, medium-term, long-term objectives? What are my objectives for the season? What are the objectives for the first round? What are the objectives for the first month? What are the weekly objectives, game-to-game objectives? So those are the things that will help you to design your training exercises. So once you start equipping yourself with the right knowledge, you understand fully the principles around everything, you will then be able to design your own specific training sessions. We will go more into detail in that because it's a very, very detailed thing. So when we design, when we talk about the methodology, the evolution of maximal training, we've evolved one that we all know, the isolated one, and then obviously the global training methodology, which is an integrated approach, multi-factor approach. So research has shown us that if you do, say, kicking for kicking, passing for passing, that's an isolated or fragmented approach, you will only optimize 1/3 potential of the player. So you need a training method that maximizes it fully. If you use the old approach, 1/3 optimal benefit you will get because all the game factors are not involved in it. You are just passing for passing, it's static drills, the game is dynamic. So the training methods have got to evolve. We spoke about a very detailed philosophy, a very detailed coach education syllabus. So the training methodology must also be relevant. I would even call it revolutionary because all methods, we need to just put it aside. We need to unlearn. We need to forget about that and start learning what the advanced countries are doing. Some guys here know on this platform have worked with this system for longer than myself, even over 20 years with success at Chibuku Youth Center, School of Excellence that has produced players like Stephen Pinar and company. So when people are talking about global training methods, I think actually here in South Africa, we were much more advanced. And that was even acknowledged by FIFA officials who visited the School of Excellence way back in the 90s. People from the KNVB in Holland, from the FA, they were shocked at how advanced the training methodology was that was used at the School of Excellence at that time. We're privileged to have some of the coaches who started the part of this group, like Thabo Dladla. There's others like Temangwenya. There's Sam Bata, who's not on this group. And some of us studied under these guys, and obviously the late Prof. So it's a training methodology that started way, way back, well over 20 to 30 years, but has evolved and will continually evolve. We were lucky under the late Prof. We were doing continuous research. Besides research, a lot of it is data. empirical knowledge. We also included indigenous knowledge systems because that's critical as we localize the content, Africanize it or localize it. If you're out of South Africa or out of the African continent, and that's also going to help us to design a new pedagogy, the new way to teach coaches. Because if we don't take into consideration the indigenous knowledge systems, then we will not be able to teach effectively. Also, we did research on pedagogy of countries that have very good coach education systems like Spain, Germany, Italy, Argentina. In Italy, there's something very interesting. When coaches do their A or pro license, they're given a topic to do as a thesis over a year. And once they finish that thesis, they come and present it to a board of very senior experienced coaches. And most of the Italian coaches have come through the system. But there's a wise old man who heads this center at Coverciano, that's the headquarters of Italian Federation. But one of the key things he mentions is, especially when ex-players come into the coaching fraternity, he says, once an ex-player says, when I was playing or when I did this, straight away they either fail you or they take you out of the class. Because what they want is they want you to come with new knowledge and learn new things. If you keep saying, when I played, I used to do this, when I played, it means your coaching knowledge is very diluted. You don't have an identity. So you rather use it in a positive way to say, to remember the good things that you learned as a player and that you did as a player, and use that in your coach education going forward. But when a former player says, when I was playing, I did 1, 2, 3. When I played, I did 1, 2. So in the Italian coach education system, they don't handle that very well. They don't accept that at all. So as much as we want former players into the game, they bring a wealth of knowledge, they bring a wealth of experience. We also need them to learn the new way of learning and to embrace the methodology, embrace the coach education, and learn and empower themselves. And I always advise former players, especially, to start at youth level. You look at a lot of the top coaches in the world today who were great players, they all started in youth coaching. Too many examples, you all know it for yourself. They spent a lot of years at youth development level before they went on to senior professional level. So as the weeks go by, we will unpack more on the training methodology. I just wanted to give you guys an idea of the training methodology doesn't exist in isolation. It is directly linked to the theory. The theory is your coach education and the philosophy. So those three things put together are what leads clubs, countries to success, whether at club level, national team level, World Cup level. Those three things put together, effectively implemented over the long term. And I think this is where we have a problem in developing countries, South Africa, rest of the continent, in Asia. We are impatient. We want quick fixes. We want answers now. We want success now. So we take shortcuts. We compromise on the way we should be playing. We select the wrong players because we go for speed, for height, for aggression, over technique and intelligence. You might achieve success. You might, which that success will be accidental, by the way. You will never replicate it. You will never repeat it. But what happens is you hurt the good players. You hurt the development of the country. So just to wrap it up, we'll just take a few more questions before we get switched off again, and then we'll wrap it up. Omar, do we have any questions?
Coach Vimalia, I have a question. Actually, basically, it's like more of an understanding. So if anyone wants to speak, I can stop. Means like, if anyone is there who wants to speak, go first.
It's fine. Carry on, Vimal.
Yeah, coach. So the thing is that basically when we talk about isolation training, so basically when I'm
hello, I lost you.
Yeah. I can hear now. Now the voice is very much clear. Thank you, Coach Omar. So the thing is that when I was
Okay,
in
your
Germany,
question?
yeah, the question was like when we go talk about isolation training. So does pattern passing comes under isolation training? Because I have observed many top academies like Bayern Munich, Barcelona using pattern passing. Even Ajax, they have used pattern passing in their youth development. So do you think it comes under isolation, or it comes under a different aspect of coaching?
Yeah, I think that's more individualized training. And if you look at it, that's why it's important as a coach to know the why. Because sometimes we might just pick up something that Barcelona is doing or Klopp is doing, and then we think, but this doesn't go with what I understand. Sometimes we need to know the why. There's a context to everything. If they're doing pattern, it could be a special tactical training session or individualized training, because generally the teams that you speak about and the coaches that work there, they don't really go for this type of pattern training, because for the very simple reason that very predictable and is very rigid. But sometimes to get maybe a sector of the team, a unit of the team, maybe the left side of the team or the midfield to work on certain aspects, there could be one session or two sessions that they would work on it. So it's more of a functional training exercise than rather something that's done all the time, If
Coach,
that answers you,
but sorry to
Philip.
interrupt you, but the thing was that I saw Ajax under 11 doing a pattern exercise, and this was just to improve the passing accuracy of the players. So basically, when I spoke to the coach, he's saying that what we do is we start initially with some players. We start with this pattern exercise so that they can get their footing proper over the ball, and then we put them into a small-sided game. So just wanted to have a clear idea about like if we can include this. Of course, pattern passing is always predictable. People will come to know at a certain point of time that it is predictable. But what do you have to say about the coach's approach when they are using that kind of a pattern exercise at under 11 and then progressing it to SSG? So your voice is cut off. Your speaker is not on.
Okay, it's on now.
Yeah, now
I
it's on.
think, Vimal, there's one thing I've learned in football, that there's nothing that's wrong in football, because what can be wrong for you can be right for me and vice versa. It just depends on what's your idea about the game, what's your ideology, your philosophy, and what you believe in. But when you mentioned, because you mentioned very key things there when you spoke about the pattern play, you mentioned about small-sided games. I think if that comes first, then it makes the issue of pattern play or pattern training, as you call it, possibly irrelevant. Maybe if you look at Ajax model, is it a model that has achieved them success, or is it a model that has helped them to develop and produce talented individuals?
It was more
So
about
that's another
developing, yeah, talented individuals.
aspect you got to
Yeah,
look at as a team.
yeah, exactly.
So maybe if we do a bit more homework, or you realize why that coach does what they do, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong, or it doesn't mean that it's not right for you, because as I said, we all have the way of doing things, but there are certain principles that we work with at MTD that we subscribe to, and I'm not a big fan of pattern play because I believe it's rigid and very predictable. I
Yeah,
would
exactly,
rather
coach.
do
That's what I
I
said.
would rather achieve I would rather achieve the same objectives what the coach wants to do in small-sided games.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was actually thinking, because it was contradicting the MT's philosophy that if you train like that, you have not enhanced yourself as a good coach. So just I have actually understood the aspect of. I have seen many coaches in India, especially coming from Holland, who are coaching in ISL. Especially there are many coaches who are working with Reliance Youth Foundation. They are the richest people in India who are
Yeah.
currently running an academy. So there is a one technical director for the Reliance who is a ex Ajax coach. He's a KNVB pro license coach, and he emphasizes a lot on pattern plays to develop the youth players, but when I saw the players, playing in the youth junior leagues, decision making was not that affluent enough. They were not able to stimulate their brain process when coming under pressure. So this was one
Absolutely,
drawback.
and you stifle their creativity and their thinking, and their
Yeah,
ability to improvise.
absolutely.
So
Yes.
yeah, as we say, there's different approaches people believe in. There's an approach believed, and it worked for me. It worked for many other people, So that's how it goes. Yeah. Omar, any other question? Thanks, Vimal.
Thank you, coach.
Hi. So I have a question.
Yes.
Yes. So basically, when we spoke about countries having foreign coaches and focusing on the local coaches, for a country like India, where we haven't had many coaches who have learned actually have to coach by going to Europe, by seeing the level of football, is it advisable to have a foreign coach so that he can first bring in the philosophy, he can first bring in the experience, and then it could be learned, and then we can have an Indian coach leading the national team. For example, we spoke about countries winning the World Cup with a local coach. But for a country like India, winning the World Cup is something that is very far away. So initially, is it important to have someone who has enough experience in Europe to come and coach and then have a local coach?
I think the question you ask is relevant also to South Africa and African football. We're not saying that a foreign coach is not good enough. But you mentioned your situation in India. Would that foreign coach come with his philosophy or be able to design a bespoke, specific Indian playing philosophy? That's the first challenge. So from there, you take it there. We're not saying that in your country, maybe there will be a foreign coach or foreign coaches, as Vimal mentioned, that can't do the job. But are they aware of the culture or Indian culture? Are they aware of the attributes of your players? Are they aware of all the other factors that are around that needs to design a philosophy? So that's the important thing. And I'm happy that it's you, at least you two young coaches, are learning a new approach, because going forward, you young coaches are the ones who will be designing an Indian playing philosophy. You will be leading the revolution of coaches in India. And then there will be less reliance on foreign coaches. I hope that answers, because it's a very complex question you ask, but there's very few. Generally, if we look at Africa, we look at Asia. As I said, I had the privilege to work in Asia. Very few foreign coaches added to the development of football on continents, sadly. For the mere fact is they don't understand the culture of the country. They don't understand, they don't know what are the strengths, the attributes of the players. And they just come for a quick fix. They might achieve success, but they don't last long. So when you look at the history of football on these two continents, there's very, very few foreigners who have actually left a positive legacy.
Right.
Sudesh, if I may add something there.
Yes, Zippo, go ahead, please.
Yeah, to your response to Amaya, I want to say that one of the key things, you may have one or two foreign experts to come and help your country, but one of the key things is that you actually have a number of coaches from India going out to the world to see what is going on, because they have the insight of India. When they find out what's going on around the world, they will come back and only use what is relevant to the community there. So that one is I think it will bring better results in a shorter space of time, but also will empower more Indian citizens in the pursuit of the Indian mission. Thanks.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you so much.
Any other question, Omar?
I think questions, coaches. Coach David Notoane with us.
David, welcome, David.
Coach David.
Yes. Hello.
Yes.
Coach Omar.
David, go ahead. You can make your comment.
Yeah. My comment is primarily gonna be to reinforce the point actually you raised on the issue of patterns of play. From my experience, knowledge, and having had the opportunity to work with a lot of foreign coaches, the one aspect that's always brought about with these patterns of play is optimization of movement, along, as you indicated, with improving the technique. But what I've seen, and I want to concur with you, is if you look at our environment, for example, in South Africa, you find that the players tend to become robotic, as you indicated, which means stifles the creative aspects that are naturally with the players. So, that, especially as we mentioned earlier on, when you come into a national setup, where now you're dealing with diverse players from different clubs with different philosophy, styles of play, you will find those that come with a play that says go wide, the patterns are the overlap comes, and then the cross is coming, and you find that you subscribe to a philosophy and style of play that says let's maximize our attributes as South Africans and Africans, especially in offensive places where you allow players to bring in their creative qualities. Then it becomes a problem because there's a disconnect in terms of where the players are coming from and what they do and to what the national demands are. So I wanted to emphasize the point you were mentioning in terms of sometimes patterns of play really indeed stifle the creative aspects of the players. And hence you find we often talk of decision making of our players at a high level not being so good if you watch our elite professional league and sometimes even at international level. So it's an aspect that I'm dwelling also deeper into. I think we touched on a very important aspect of the benefits of patterns of play. Maybe they work for European players, I don't know, because they grow with it from a young age. Whereas in South Africa, players are in the street playing freely. When they come into the academy now, the patterns come in and the creativity is stifled.
Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you, David. That was very insightful. Some of the guys are sure some of the last speaker was David Notoane, the South African net.
People was asking you as well, Omar, to mute. Sudesh, go ahead. Unmute, Sudesh. Unmute, Sudesh.
Okay. Yeah, just to close, guys, there's a quote from a great African liberation leader called Thomas Sankara. He was also the first prime minister of Burkina Faso in West Africa. In it, it says, "It took the madmen of yesterday for us to be able to act with extreme clarity today. I want to be one of those madmen. We must dare to invent the future." So to the guys in India, Vimal, Amaya, do a bit of research on a guy called Thomas Sankara and the thinking, because what you are trying to do in India, same thing we've been trying to do in Africa. And people might think we are crazy, but the results will show down the line. Thank you, guys. Until next week.